Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today's webinar isn't just another discussion about fraud. We will be hearing from the experts at BCC Iccrea Group, the largest cooperative banking group in Italy, about how a shift in their approach led to game-changing results in their fight against fraud. We all see the headlines, the reports. Fraud is happening on a scale we haven't encountered before. It's organized, strategic, and persistent, and what used to be one-off scams are now highly coordinated operations, often backed by criminal syndicates or even state actors. With digital banking, API integrations, and real-time payments, fraudsters have more entry points than ever. They exploit weak spots and APIs, they leverage automation, and they blend technical attacks with psychological manipulation through social engineering. And with fraud as a service and malware as a service now available on the dark web, even inexperienced criminals have access to advanced tools. Despite robust security measures, fraud continues to outpace defenses. In 2023 alone, global online fraud losses reached an eye-watering $485.6 billion. And what's interesting is that 81% of fraud in Europe is cyber-enabled. The transaction itself is merely the final step in a much longer digital attack sequence. So whether it's APP scams or account takeover fraud, long before fraud occurs, criminals have already laid the groundwork, exploiting vulnerabilities and setting the stage to ultimately commit fraud. So today's conversation is about changing the way that we see fraud. What if we, instead of reacting to fraudulent transactions, you could identify and neutralize threats days, sometimes weeks, before they even reach that stage? And I'm joined by experts who've done exactly that. From BCC Iccrea Group, we have Giuseppe Scamponi, Fraud Manager, and Carolina Ticillo, Counselor Fraud Analyst, who've helped BCC Iccrea Group to reduce fraud by 80%, saving millions. And also with us is Mimo Solano, Senior Solution Architect at Cleafy, who worked closely with them on this transformation. So before we get started, I wanted to share the forward-thinking mindset change that BCC Iccrea Group embraced, one that completely changed how they tackle fraud. So BCC Iccrea Group knew that fraudsters, they don't just show at the point of transaction. They test, they probe, and set things in motion long before that. While, like many financial institutions, they had an anti-fraud strategy and system in place, they found it only provided them with bits and pieces of information, much like scattered pages of a book, making it hard to connect the dots of whether an alert was fraud or not. By adopting a shift-left approach, which means spotting an attack to commit fraud much earlier in the process, rather than dealing with it after the damage is done, they are able to stop fraud at its source, catching early warning signs, identifying key indicators of multi-layered scams, suspicious behavior, unusual device activity, and patterns that don't add up. And I need to say that this is exactly what Cleafy enables financial institutions to do, helping them to move beyond chasing fraud alerts to really understanding the bigger picture, the full story, so that banks can see threats developing in real time, enabling to shut down those fraud attempts before they reach the transaction stage, even before their customers log into their bank accounts. Our fraud extended detection and response system can often predict fraud up to 15 days on average before money moves. And it's a huge advantage over traditional fraud tools, and all that without disrupting genuine customers. So let's dive into how BCC Iccrea Group made the shift, moving from constantly putting out fires to staying ahead of fraud in real time without friction for their genuine customers. So like many financial institutions joining us today, BCC Iccrea faced a number of common challenges. They were focused on stopping fraud before it even reached the point of transaction, but their traditional systems were too one-dimensional to keep up with the rapidly evolving threats. And at the same time, they had to strike the right balance between reducing fraud and avoiding unnecessary friction for their customers. And of course, they recognized that fraud as a service was lowering the entry barriers for criminals, making it even harder to stay ahead of the game. So let's take a step back for a moment. Giuseppe, Carolina, 85% of your transactions are now digital. That's huge. With fraud tactics evolving just as quickly, I can imagine that the shift must come with its own set of real challenges. Giuseppe, can you walk us through the moment you realized your old approach weren't enough?
Our old system realigned on traditional technology uses static rules based on transaction amount frequency. This means our fraud analysis was low and reactive. We could only detect fraud after it had already happened. The real challenge was that we couldn't efficiently analyze session real time on our portals during fraud scenarios. With Cleafy, we introduced two major improvements: a login control framework and behavioral transaction analysis. This allowed us to track fraud step behavior in real time, how they conduct an ATO, so account takeover, which pages of our app they accessed, their pre-login activity, and how they attempted to steal credentials and money to our customer. By implementing Cleafy, we gained a deeper understanding of fraud tactics, enabling us to flag and stop suspicious sessions at the login stage. We also enhanced our transaction risk analysis and the new risk indicator, and that improved prevention while minimizing friction for legitimate users. Another key advantage was the shared suite across our anti-fraud unit, back office, and the security center, ensuring real-time knowledge sharing and maximize integration. Ultimately, we move beyond just identifying risky transactions. We can now detect and prevent suspicious sessions before fraud occurs, obviously.
Thank you, Giuseppe.
Yeah.
So as we've just heard from Giuseppe, BCC Iccrea faced multiple challenges as digital transactions became the norm. They found themselves increasingly vulnerable to persistent fraud attempts, particularly around instant transfers and online banking. And on top of this, phishing, malware, and bot attacks grew more frequent, and the complexity of online interactions made their previous security measures less effective. Another issue was the disconnect that they had between their cyber and fraud teams. This lack of cross-team visibility slowed down response times and ultimately impacted their ability to act on fraud quickly. And it also increased customer friction as false positives and account restrictions were affecting legitimate users. So with all these rising threats, Giuseppe, what were the biggest day-to-day challenges? Was it the speed of attacks, the sheer volume, or something else entirely?
Well, the biggest challenge was understanding how these attacks were happening. Before Cleafy, we had very little insight into fraud tactics. Fraudsters typically aim to steal credentials, but we had no visibility into where and how they were doing it. For example, Cleafy helped us see that fraudsters were targeting our pre-login area, a blind spot we hadn't focused before. Once we identified this, we could reinforce our security where it mattered most. Another major issue was the sheer speed and intensity of attack. Fraud campaign will spike in short time frames, making it difficult to gather and analyze information fast enough. With Cleafy, we can now instantly see attack pattern and act decisively, fastly, quickly. By reducing fraud, we have also freed up more time to focus on helping customers with their everyday security concern, rather than constantly fighting fraud incidents.
When you were relying on the traditional approach, tools, did you ever feel like you were always 2 steps behind?
Absolutely. With the old system, we were always reacting, never ahead of the attackers. We only spot fraud once transactions were flagged as suspicious, which means fraudsters had already gained access. Now we are proactive. We can identify and block suspicious sessions before fraudsters reach the transaction stage. Instead of playing catch up, we are staying ahead.
Good to know. Carolina, you use this technology every day to protect customers. Do you also extend that communication to them?
Well, yes, absolutely. While Cleafy works behind the scene to stop fraud, to prevent fraud, we also focus on keeping customer informed and aware. And we send proactive alerts when we detect unusual activity. So we provide to educational resources to help customers recognize potential threats. And it's about making sure they feel both protective and empowered when using our services. So beyond the fraud prevention, Cleafy helps us to identify risk customer behavior and like weak password or suspicious transaction pattern, which allow us to launch awareness campaign on digital security. So, for example, many of our customers now recognize fraudulent event text and calls, and thanks to our awareness initiatives. So, instead to our awareness, that's a big report suspicious message, and that's a big sheet from before, and it provides to education is just as critical as prevention.
Absolutely. So BCC Iccrea shared their key challenges with us. Wouldn't it be interesting to know the biggest challenge in fraud prevention for everybody attending this webinar? Shall we find out with a quick poll? And we'll give it a minute to see. Wow. We'll give it 5 more seconds to hit those buttons. Right, shall I share the interesting results? This is very neck on neck. So, it seems we have a tie between too many false positives, all of the above. Then in first place, we actually have the lack of visibility into early fraud indicators. And then in last place, also a tie, we have the manual investigation takes too long and fraud techniques evolve too quickly. Interesting stats. Now, this actually brings us to an important point. So when we look at a traditional approach to fraud management, it often provides us with a very narrow view. We've mentioned this before, only spotting fraud after it's occurred, leaving us reactive. But BCC Iccrea was able to see the full attack chain, preventing fraud before money moves. So Giuseppe, you chose Cleafy to help you bridge the gap. What made you decide that this was the right approach?
Traditional fraud tools focus on transactions. Cleafy look at all the session, giving us the ability to solve fraud before money moves. This was the key difference. Fraud prevention used to be reactive. With Cleafy, we now have a cyber fraud fusion model where every fraud case is jointly analyzed by multiple teams. The back office gains deeper insight to assess fraudulent sessions more effectively. The cyber unit can determine whether malware was involved, identify anomalies like IP skipping, large geographic jumps, or absence of human interaction. And the anti-fraud team leverages all this data to adapt countermeasures against emerging fraud schemes, new schemes we see. Beyond prevention, Cleafy has also strengthened our post-fraud process. We now have stronger evidence to defend against fraud-related disputes and can issue real-time precise warning to customers during risky sessions. This has not only enhanced user protection, but also improved overall fraud prevention entirely.
And was there any resistance to this approach?
Our teams were already used to working together, but they weren't always using the same data. Having a shared platform has been crucial. It integrates knowledge across teams and ensures everyone is working with the same information. However, it was equally important to train people on how to use the platform effectively. This process also involved resolving differences in data format, structure, and semantic to create an unified data sheet that could be analyzed and used for decision making. As a result, our decision making has become faster and more precise. We have significantly reduced the length of meeting, allow us to focus that time on developing new risk indicator tags to monitor new risk and enhance customer protection.
Good to know. So Carolina, what was the onboarding process like for someone in your role? Was there a steep learning curve, or did you feel it intuitive?
Yes, the onboarding process for my role was truly inspiring. At first, there was definitely a learning curve, but it was exciting and to explore new dimension of technology and understand how they integrate into my work. So every new tool and piece of information I encountered was a challenge that pushed me to grow. And over time, many aspects became more intuitive. So one of the most fascinating and valuable parts of my role is analyze user behavior. And it's not just about detecting fraud, but it also play a key role detecting fraud and in raising awareness. So by using a target technique like communication and training, we can help user and better understand different types of fraud and how to protect themselves. And this dual approach, prevention to technology and education, makes the work both constructive and rewarding.
All right. So let's talk impact. You've seen an 80% reduction in fraud. You've saved over €500,000 a month, and you've significantly reduced false positive. But numbers only tell part of the story. Carolina, how has your role evolved now that you're not chasing as many false positive? Has it freed you up to focus on bigger picture threats?
Yes, since adopting the platform, my role has evolved significantly, and the dramatic reduction in false positive has been a game changer. It means I spend less time chasing false alarms and more time analyzing and mitigating real threats. So with the platform handling much of manual work, I can now focus on more complex fraud patterns and develop strategies to prevent emerging threats. And it's been a shift from reactive to proactive fraud prevention. Give me the time and the resources to tackle the bigger security challenges that truly matter. And it's not just about responding to fraud, but staying ahead of it. For example, thanks to Cleafy, we can now detect if a customer is on call while making payment, and this insight help us to determine whether it's a false positive or a potential fraud case by monitoring customer action in real time. And if the behavior align with the fraud pattern, we can intervene immediately in real time, so preventing losses while simultaneously and reducing friction for legitimate transaction.
Great. So I've got another question for Giuseppe. Giuseppe, what has the feedback been like from your customers? Has the reduced friction been noticeable?
Yeah, well, customer feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. We have not only reduced fraud, but also significantly cut down on false positives, making transactions smoother and more secure. Cleafy has allowed us to move beyond rigid statistical rules, such as fixed values, limitation threshold, and transaction limits, to a more intelligent and adaptive system. This means our fraud prevention is now both more precise and less intrusive, striking the right balance between security and usability with fewer disruptions and fewer necessary security checks. Fraud detection is now more precise, so customers don't have to go to extra authentication steps unless it's necessary.
Let's open this up a bit. So for everybody joining the webinar today, you're likely dealing with similar challenges. Giuseppe, Carolina, what advice would you give to other institutions trying to tackle fraud at this level? I go to Giuseppe first.
Yeah, look beyond transaction, fraudsters leave traces long before the money moves. Having visibility into login behavior, session activity, and device signals make all the difference.
And if you could start this process again, what would you do differently?
Well, we are happy with what we built, but if anything, we could have done it sooner. The sooner your transaction to real-time fraud detection, the better. There is always room to refine and evolve, but the foundation we built is truly strong.
And Carolina, what is the one piece of advice you would give to fraud analysts working in high-pressure environments like yours?
Yes, my biggest piece of advice is to stay calm and take a methodical approach. So, in high pressure environments, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, but stay focused on the facts and using the tool and your disposal makes all the difference. Keep learning. Fraud is constantly evolving, so upskilling and analyzing past cases will help you stay ahead. And don't be afraid to ask for help or escalate issue when it's necessary. Teamwork is necessary and is effectively talking fraud. A strong collaborative approach will always yield better results.
Excellent. So before we wrap up and go to questions, I want to bring Mimo into the conversation to talk about BCC Iccrea's experience in this shifting left approach to fraud management. you were on the ground helping BCC Iccrea implement Cleafy's platform. What were the biggest challenges during the deployment, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, hello. First, I'd like to thank Giuseppe, of course, his team, Carolina, and all internal colleagues who played a role in this project. Technical setup itself was straightforward, but real challenge generally was changing the team's mindset. I mean, fraud teams were used to reacting after fraud already occurred. With Cleafy, they had to shift towards a proactive approach, identifying threats earlier, stopping a attack before they could cause damage, practically. Once they saw how much earlier they could intervene, the transition became much easier. After the initial integration, technical integration, basically, we focus on optimizing workflow. So orchestrating, automating manual processes to enhance efficiency. Key part of this was ensuring that teams fully understood the concept behind Cleafy. I mean, we helped them adopt a cyber and analytical approach, looking beyond individual transaction to analyze the full context on which the user are performing the operation. The shift has been crucial in strengthening fraud prevention and also responses.
And what role does ongoing support play in ensuring success post-implementation?
Yeah, it play a crucial role, of course. Our customer operation team's focus is to support customer using Cleafy, and on the other hand, help in the transition to a shift-left paradigm approach to risk. The key is to try to shift the operational focus toward proactively analyzing fraud scenarios and remediation, compared with how to technically implement them.
Mima, we had a few questions from webinar attendees. Thank you so much for everybody who submitted questions while they were registering. And I think this is one of the questions for you. Thank you for the slide as well. So the question was, how does Cleafy stay ahead of emerging threats? And I'll just move to your slide. There we go.
Yeah, well, basically using a dynamic and adaptive approach to fraud detection, leveraging among many others four key points principally. So real-time attack data. So we continuously analyze fraud attempt in real time, allowing us to detect new attack patterns as they emerge. This ensures that our the detection modules evolve alongside the latest fraud tactics. Customer field insight and feedback. We work closely with our customers, gathering insight from real-world cases. Their feedback help us refine our model, improve our detection accuracy, ensuring our solutions stay relevant to evolving threats. Threat intelligence work. Our dedicated threat intelligence team monitor global fraud trends, track adversary tactics, and try to integrate this finding into our detection models to proactively mitigate risk. And of course, industry research. I mean, our product team stay engaged with the broader industry, analyzing report trends, best practices. This research helps us anticipate shift in fraud methodologies and adapt our technology accordingly.
Thank you, Mimo. We've addressed some of the questions that we submitted during the registration, and we now have two more to cover. So if you have any additional questions, please drop them in the chat to us. But I'll jump straight on to the pre-registration questions. Giuseppe, I am going to give this one to you. So the question is, regarding proactive fraud detection in the timeline, how long does detection take before the monetary transaction is generated until the closure of each alerted case, and what friction is being generated for the customer? And there's an additional question about the percentage of false positive alerts, false positives, and false negatives.
Well, the platform detects fraud in real time, usually well before the monetary transaction is completed. Fraudulent sessions are flagged during the early stage of interaction, whether it's during the login process or the sessions first sign on unusual behavior, giving us ample time to stop fraud before it can escalate a full transaction. Cleafy's advanced detection and machine learning capabilities ensure high accuracy of distinguishing between real fraud and false alerts. While the exact percentage may vary depending on the specific case, Cleafy platform is known for its ability to deliver a low rate of false positive, significantly reducing customer impact. False negative are also minimized thanks to the platform continuous learning, enhancing its ability to spot even the most sophisticated fraud tactics.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Another one, and I think, Mimo, you've already answered this question. I'll just read it out. What challenges were encountered in bringing this excellent solution into full operation, whether technical or otherwise? How were they overcome, and what lessons can be learned for other clients to streamline the fraud detection system tuning process? Yeah, like I said, I think Mimo already answered that question. Thank you, Mimo. But then we have another one that says, it's also for you, Mimo. How do you balance fraud detection and prevention with consumer duty and good consumer outcomes?
Yeah, well, balancing fraud detection with consumer duty means preventing fraud effectively while minimizing disruption for legitimate users. Basically, Cleafy achieved this through real-time session level detection, identifying suspicious activity without blocking genuine customers. Platform itself prioritizes early fraud detection while ensuring a seamless user experience and only intervening when there's a clear risk. Proactive approach reduces unnecessary friction, allowing customer to execute operations securely without any extra hurdles. Additionally, it is possible also to integrate directly the platform smoothly with existing systems, such as sending real-time alerts to customer during the risk session, or otherwise receiving some data from an external system. This allowing businesses to adapt their response strategy, basically.
Thank you, Mimo. Do we have any other questions before we wrap up? I can't see any. So today we've explored how fraud management is evolving. BCC Iccrea has shifted from simply reacting to fraud to proactively preventing it before it even happens. This transformation isn't just about adopting new technology, it's about redefining strategy, collaboration, and uniting cyber and fraud teams. It's about a fundamental shift in perspective. So you can dive deeper into this approach by exploring our insightful ebook. Just scan the QR code to access it. And on that note, I thank you all for joining.